Hello and welcome to the chart breakdown with the Pivots Queen. I wanted to go over Euro USD from last week. I did give you guys like an analysis video on what I was looking out for. So now I'm in replay mode and I'm basically going to break down all of the trades that I took last week, because last week was interesting, and I'll try to give like a brief overview of what I'm expecting for this upcoming week. Um, just to note, my daughter is here with me. She is refusing to take her nap. My goal was to record this at her nap time. I didn't want to wait too late to record this and kind of get this up to you guys. It is right now like 10:38 on Monday, May 11th. So the market has already kind of started and got going. But hopefully I could kind of give you an analysis for the remainder of the week. So it's gonna be background noise here, so I do apologize. Um, Again, I'm not really editing these videos too much, but if it does get too noisy, I'll try to see if I can edit that out. Um, but let's go ahead and get into it. Okay. I think someone is finished with their tantrum, hopefully. And we are gonna get back to this. So, last week, I told you guys if we saw a price kind of break above this zone, we could look for buys up to the top of our 4-hour channel here. But if price broke below the zone, we could look for sales. Kind of seeing if price was going to retest the top of this 1-hour channel, or if price was going to break back into that channel and start trading back within that channel. And in that case, we would sell down to the bottom of our 4-hour channel here. So that was our overall bias. And so when it came to entries, I mainly get my entries on like the M30, M15 time frame. And oops, let's lock that. Um, so that's mainly how I get my entries. So for this trade in particular, I was really just waiting for price to break below this zone. And then I was going to get my sell entry. So let's let this play out. Um, I did enter a little prematurely, I would say. I think I might have entered somewhere around here because I entered right before I went to bed. But definitely make sure you're waiting for your indications to take place, because if you're entering before your confirmations, you run the risk of hitting stop loss. So I always preach wait for your confirmations. This trade in particular, I did enter a little early. Um, but my entry was somewhere around here. I put my stop loss above the last high. Um, this isn't the right color. Hold on. There we go. And then my target was just down to this next zone here. I think I might have had a swing, so just like literally the smallest piece of position that was targeting this overall zone. Um, but really was trading zone to zone. So majority of my position I closed at this zone. But that was my first target, my first trade setup. Um, so like I said, I entered early, but it would have been better to wait on that break of that zone, which happened somewhere around here. We got that first break at like 4 a.m. I figured I would be asleep. But that break did end up happening. And wow, we had a really big drop. Um, Pre-New York session, right? Because New York session usually starts at 9. Sometimes you get some movement at 7, but we had a really nice drop there at first. And so I typically start looking at the market again in the morning. Um, I would say like 7, 8 a.m. So once I woke up, I saw that I was already in profit. I did draw a trend line. I think I remember saying that I wanted price to move around a little bit before I drew my trend line, because this trend line would just be too tight of a trend line. Um, So I drew my trend line here, and my thought process was, okay, as long as price doesn't break this trend line, then my sales setup should be good. And then also we had price break below this zone. Um, so let me draw a box. So we had a break here. Either that first candle, but really that big drop down was a clear break. So price could come back to retest, and then that could possibly be another entry or just indication that the trade is still good to stay in. So that's really what I was looking for. So I'm gonna let this play. So we can see price started pulling back. We're in our area of interest. So far it looks like price is respecting that area. So I actually did get another entry on this sell in this area because price looked like it was retesting. So that was my entry. I actually entered probably a little around that area. Um, I used this high that it formed here as my last high. So stop loss a little bit above that last high. The risk to reward going to this first zone was off. I will say that. So for my first TP where I was targeting this zone, I made my stop loss a little bit tighter. Um, so that way it had a better risk to reward. But for my trade that I was actually trying to take to the next zone, I used that wired TP just so it could have a little bit more breathing room, and the risk to reward ratio made sense. Um, but that was my second trade entry. And then I'm going to speed this up just a little bit. That one did hit my first target. Stop loss moved to break even on this entry. I like my trades to go a little bit more in profit, so I can't recall. I think I ended up moving this stop loss to break even before market close, because market close was here. So that was basically all of Monday. That was Sunday night, Monday morning. And so those trades stop loss I moved to break even. I extended my trend line out, and I was just watching to see if you're going to reach basically this next zone because prices already started breaking through this next zone. So price started to move below this zone a little bit. Um, at this point, I don't think I entered into anything. I might have entered something Monday night, late Monday night, because it looked like price was starting to break through this zone. So I was trying to catch a trade to the next zone. I used this high here as my last high. Um, and then this was my target. So that was Monday night. And so I'm just gonna let this play out till like Tuesday morning. Um, we could see it started to go into profit a little bit, but then price started to just be consolidating. Um, so before that happened, somewhere in here, I went ahead and closed all my sell positions. Just because I noticed the consolidation, and it also looked like price was somewhat breaking my trend line to the upside. And then there was one more piece of information that let me know that this sell might be over, and that was divergence. So I had divergence on the M15, bullish divergence. There was divergence on the M30, I believe. Yeah, a lot of divergence on the M30 here. And then I think there was also 1 hour divergence. So seeing that divergence, and seeing that price across my trend line to the upside is what let me know that that sell was over, even though I was targeting that next zone. I went ahead and cut my losses in this area because of that indication. Now, divergence on its own, does that mean that price is going to reverse? We can even see that there was divergence here, right? Divergence just indicates that there is some type of reversal happening and that this divergence did play out. We had to push up, right? But it didn't break our trend. So that's why we didn't start looking for buys in that area. Price respected that trend line, so we kept looking for sales. But now we see divergence and price breaking the trend line, so that is indication that we could see a more significant reversal. So I went ahead and closed my sales, like I said, somewhere in here where I saw price was consolidating when I woke up. And then I was like, well, maybe I should start to look for some buys because I do have 1 hour divergence, which is pretty strong divergence. Um, because it's based on the higher time frame, and I had my trend line break. So those are like two of my confluences for entry. But the next thing I need to see before I get into a trade is some type of break in structure. Um, I can look for my break of structure on the lower time frame, so I can look on N15. Um, I would say this was my last clear high. You could say that this is a high too, but with that consolidation, it's kind of hard to tell if that's really broken or not. So for like really clear cut, if price breaks above this high, um, then I know that we have that breaking structure, and that will give me more of a confirmation for an entry. So once I see price starting to break above this zone, which is kind of happening with this candle, I like to see a candle close above the zone or a candle close or two. But I will say I did end up getting in this buy at the break. You don't have to get in at the break. It's actually preferred or recommended that you get in on the break and the retest, just so you have extra confirmation. I did get one entry at the break and then I got another at the retest. So I'm going to kind of try to break both of those down. Um, but at the break, my stop loss, I kind of used a little bit below that consolidation. Below the last low would technically be here. And I think I did use below the last low for my further stretch targets. But you want to make sure you're paying attention to your risk to reward. So risk to reward for this one, you can see is a 0.68. So you want it to be one or greater. So for that bigger stop loss, I was targeting this purple zone. So now you can see the risk reward is 2.5. So that's great if it's above one, good, above two, greater. So this was a good risk reward for that particular move. But for the trade where I was kind of targeting just to this zone, I did use a tighter stop loss. So the risk reward could be more like a 1 to 1. That's just how I stretch out my trades because I look at myself as like an intraday swing. So for like my technically like swing TPs, I do like to use a wider stop loss because those sometimes need more breathing room. But for of my more of my intraday moves or my quick moves, I use a tighter stop loss. Because I'm just trying to get to the next zone. So I'm hoping that all of this makes sense. I'm doing all of this and trying to fight a sleeping baby at the same time. So I really want to make sure I'm hitting on all the notes that I want to point out. But essentially, at the break of this zone, is where I was looking for my buy. And then for the retest, we can see prices coming down here. So this was my break entry, and that stayed the same. And then let me move. Sorry, I just want to stretch this one out. So when price came back and started to retest this level, um, I went ahead and got a second entry. Typically for the retest, you want to see things like wick rejection, just some indication that price is starting to turn around. Um, and again, tighter stop loss for the tighter targets, wider stop loss for like the wider targets. And then why I was targeting for my buy this zone up here is because this was kind of our indication that, if price stayed below the zone, we were selling. And so I wanted to buy this to this area because price could come here, respect this level, and then start selling off. So I didn't want to try to take my buy too far into the future. But that was my setup. And I actually want to slow it down here because I feel like this is where a lot of traders would make mistakes because I got in here thinking like, oh, price is retesting, right? We had a strong rejection there, but then price kind of hung around in this area. And I know a lot of traders would have just been like, oh, I was wrong. They were probably closed in this area. They were getting nervous. But because price never broke below my last low, I still held on to that trade, right? So it pulled back a lot deeper than I was expecting it to, but it never invalidated my market structure. And then look at that price took off literally in the evening, like outside of market hours. But this is a good example of why you stay in the trade and you don't let doubt or fear make you kind of close that trade because this trade was never invalidated. It never broke below my lows that I had here. Therefore, there was no reason for me to close the trade. It hit my first target pretty easily. And so that gave me the confidence to stay inside of my trade. And then especially if I saw price break above my zone that I have here, that would give me even more confidence to stay in my trade. And I could have possibly looked for a second entry, but I will admit I didn't look for an entry at that point. I was just happy that my trades had hit my first target and I just moved my stop loss to break even. Um, but we did get a break above that zone. I will say Wednesday, I was happy with my profits at that point. Um, so I really wasn't looking for any more trade setups. From the sell, um, I think my original move, I caught like 40 pips. But then I had that second entry. This one, I didn't really, it closed more so I break even. All right, so I would say I probably got like 40, 50 pips from that move. And then from this move, I believe I caught about 80 pips. So I was pretty set with my weeks. This was 40. Overall, that was 50. And then I had that second entry. So I caught about 80 pips between um, the two entries. So I was pretty satisfied with my trading week for that week. Stop loss was moved to break even. Um, And I kind of wrap things up there. What I was saying last week is if we did break above this purple zone, which we got that break above, my next target was to this zone. It's like price broke above, it came back and it basically just retested the zone that we had here. Um, I actually do think I took a small entry on that and I'm gonna break that down. Um, So let's talk about it. So I put trend lines on everything. So I did have like a trend line running. Uh, it was here because this just had more touches. Even though I had know it has that peak below here. We have a bunch of touches there and a touch here. But either way, if you drew it this way, it's still valid. But this was just the way I had my trend line drawn. So I noticed price broke below my trend line to the downside. But overall, if we look at the market structure from a higher time frame, um, we have basically this push up. This was just a pullback and then it continued moving in its buying direction. Right. So it never really broke the buying market structure. If we look at the last low, this was kind of like the last low area. So when price pulled back, it just made another higher low. Um, so that's how I looked at that from like the higher time frame perspective. So for lower time frame, I had a trend line basically on this down move. Then there was M15 divergence. Again, divergence on its own, um, it's not the best indicator, but divergence with a trend line break is pretty nice. Um, so I will admit I did get this buy here, and I actually forgot about it. And I took it to 17,800. It was a small position. Like I said, majority of my profits I made from my trades on Monday and Tuesday. This was a small trade where I had one TP at the purple zone, this TP at this next level. I used that as a TP because it was a major pivotal zone. So it was the 8 at that time. So that's why I targeted there. And then that was about 55 pips. Um, so that was last week. So now we can talk about um this week. I do have a 1 hour channel now, and price is kind of trading in between there. So hopefully all of that made sense. Baby girl just fell asleep, so I feel like I'm finally able to kind of like woosah. Um, so I'm glad that at least in my calm moments, I could kind of explain for what I'm looking for next week. But last week was a really great week, so I hope you guys were able to kind of take advantage of that move. I did add, so I'm glad I'm able to talk about it now. I added this green box because this is like my 1 hour consolidation, and yeah, last week we were basically trading in the mix of consolidation. Now remember this orange box that's in the back. Let me lock this first. Is our 4 hour consolidation. So we kind of had like consolidation within consolidation. Um, Noticing this consolidation zone is kind of why I thought price might sell down to this area, kind of sell to the bottom, bar back up. Price, we didn't get that. And that's fine. We just move with the market. We do what the market suggests, and we don't push our biases on the market. We just react to how the market moves. So for this week, it's literally like too late to kind of get into any trades now. Um, the market did open with a gap, so let me switch charts. Just so you can see the gap. So here we go. This was the gap that the market opened with, and so price just closed that gap. So I'm actually interested to see what we're gonna see this week. So um I'm basically not trading in this zone. This is kind of market figuring out what it's gonna do zone. I am gonna adjust my trend line here. Right, so I have two touches, this being my first, that being my second. And I basically want to see how price is going to react at that trend line. When it comes to divergence, divergence is actually already forming. I did see 4 hour divergence, I believe. Yes, okay, so there is 4 hour divergence forming. But remember, just seeing divergence doesn't mean that we're automatically going to sell. It's just like an indication, but we need other confluences on top of it to confirm that that's what the market is in fact doing. So there is 4 hour divergence forming. So I did want to point that out, indicating that this buy could be over soon. We do need other indications. So that's why I have my trend line here. If price breaks this trend line to the downside, um, then I possibly would get to sales, take sales just back down to the zone, kind of bottom of my 4 hour channel. And let's see, let's draw that out. Um, then I would wait to see what price does. If we break this zone, kind of that channel, Um, let's make this purple. I try to use purple for my sells and green for my buys, but I never really stick to the color. If we break that zone, just to the next zone, and we're really just taking things zone to zone, right? But essentially, because we're in the same consolidation range, um, the same zones that I had, for the break last week, it's going to be pretty similar to this week. For the buys, now we're not going to look for any buys in this area because we don't want to get caught up in that, in the buys, especially when we could see that a sell could possibly be coming. But if price breaks above this major zone, it would be breaking the previous highs, and I do think that there's highs over here. So with it breaking those previous highs and creating higher highs, then we could look for some buy opportunities. Um, we're just going to trade them cautiously because we are aware of that divergence kind of forming on the higher time frame. But like I said, just because we see divergence does not mean that the market is automatically going to reverse. It's just an indication that a reversal could be coming. Now, price can form diverging for structures for as long as it wants to, right? So it doesn't mean that it's just over as soon as the divergence pops up. It can, let's see. It could just keep diverging and slowly moving up. And all of this can be a one big diverging structure before we get that break, right? So we're not just going to automatically hop into sales because we see that divergence. We're going to wait. And if price happens to break above this zone, then we're going to still look for buy opportunities as long as price is in buying market structure. How do you know when the buying market structure is over? When there is a break of structure. So let me reinstall this. So right now we are in buying market structure. We have low, high, higher low. If it breaks above, it'll be creating a higher high. So price can make a higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high. It'll keep forming buying market structure. But if price happens to break any of these previous lows, so if it breaks this low, if it breaks this low, if it breaks this low, that is giving you a break of structure, and that is giving you indication that a reversal is coming. So basically what I'm saying is if it breaks that high, I'm still looking for buy opportunities until I get a break of structure and a change in that trend. If that is too advanced for you or you don't have the clearest understanding of market structure yet, then just wait on the zones. So, price can do whatever it does up here and you just don't sell until the price breaks below this low. All right, so it could do whatever it wants up here, but once it breaks this low, then that's when you look for your sell opportunities. Um, so hopefully all of that makes sense. And I know this was a little rushed and I had to do it with some complications. But essentially that's what I'm looking for. So I'm actually just gonna copy and paste this arrow. So that's essentially what we're looking for this week. Um, I will say I'm really not expecting it to go any higher than that, so I won't have an analysis for above that. I mean, it's maybe as far as this purple channel, because that's like my weekly. Um, but yeah, price has just been in this consolidation for so long. Um, so I don't really see it going beyond that. I mean, I guess unless some crazy news happens, which could happen with the way the news has been lately. But honestly, this is probably as far as I see it going. Let me just check my pivot levels. I do believe we are at the top of pivots on most of the time frames. Like 4 hour, 1 hour, we are at the eight. So again, that is indication that we could see a sell happen soon. But just because it's at the eight doesn't mean that we're just going to sell. We need those confluences to all line up. Um, okay, so that's a six. So the eight on the daily would be like as far as I would see it going. Um, but I really don't know if we're gonna see it go that far. Um, we will see. Maybe it'll break out of this 4 hour consolidation. But as far as like my weekly analysis goes, I would just say if it does keep buying, I would buy up to this zone. Um, Honestly, I don't really have a bias. I'm just gonna kind of wait for things to react. You can see I have my alerts already set up at, both zones and just I'm waiting to see which way price breaks. But I will say like we are in buying market structure. So that's why I'm not just hopping into the sales, even though we are at the eight. I want more confluences. And then I'm not really seeing like there was bearish divergence here, but it already kind of pushed down. Um, I'm not really seeing like the freshest uh bearish divergence on the lower time frame yet. That's what I'm looking for your USD. Now the key to sleep, I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording here, do any edits to this video and try to get it uploaded to you guys within the next couple of hours. So you'll have this for tonight, Monday night, and then on to the rest of the week. So I hope everyone has a great day. Happy trading, and I will see you guys next time. Later.